Hello, this is Sharkback's Guide to Frost Death Knights for Dummies. Hopefully I'll be able to explain what the fuck to do as this class. It's pretty goddamn easy. I guess for starters I'll go over talents. Recent changes, Death Knights, there's really only one build as far as I can tell that you can go anymore, which is something similar to this. Your first tier, you've got Shattering Strikes, which is bad. Don't take this. It resets your Razor Ice on a target, which is not good. And then you have to restack them. The effect you get from this talent I don't think is good. You have Icy Talons, Frost Strike, increasing your melee attack speed, stacking up to 3 times. Excuse me. This used to be the go-to talent, but I believe this has been nerfed. And then you have Runic Attunation. Recently, I guess they've changed how your runic power regens or some shit, so this is the go-to nowadays. I read that somewhere, so I believe it, and it seems pretty good as far as I can tell. Tier 2, Hornwinter is bad, don't get this. Mirror's efficiency, I think, is pretty good. I think it depends on your haste. If you have terrible rune regeneration, this talent I think is pretty good. But if you have high enough haste, I think you can get away with Freezing Fog, which just makes your just more damage, which is great. This talent I believe has been nerfed as well. But if you have the haste, I think you can get away with it. So these two are pretty good, these two talents. Don't get this one. Next you got tier 3. Never get this. It's bad. Avalanche is not very good. Maybe for like Mythic Dungeons, I don't know. But Ice Cap is nuts. Your Frost Cap, or your Frost Strike, can obliterate criticals, reduce the cooldown of Pillar Frost, which is your main damage cooldown. And with this you can line up Obliteration, which we'll get to in a second. You can line up Obliteration and Pillar Frost very well. So this is a really good talent. I would always get this. Next tier, this is sort of your CC tier. Doesn't really matter. Whatever. This next tier is sort of survivability. I don't even know what the hell this thing does. Each stack causes you. I don't know how good this is. Probably not very good, at least for PvE. Maybe PvP would be good, I don't know. But these two are my go-to for PvE content. They're both good. For Frost I would get if there's constant raid-wide damage going out. Volatile Shielding is more for like burst, or if there's one mechanic that really fucks you over. And on top of that, just buffing your anti-magic shield is insane, because anti-magic shield is a busted fucking ability. We'll get to that in a minute too. Next tier, Frozen Pulse. No. Gathering Storm, yes. Each rune spent during Remorseless Winter increases damage and extends duration. This is very good for AoE and single target. Frost Scythe is a good talent. It's one of the best like AoE burst abilities, I think. But it's really only good in Mythic Pluses. I would go with Gathering Storm for pretty much everything else. And then finally we get to the last tier. The old playstyle comboed these two runes together, or talents together, but they moved, I believe, Hungering Rune Weapon and Glacial Advance. They swapped these two. So, you no longer can combo these together like you used to, and by themselves, it's just not good. Obliteration, the way to go, 100% of the time. So that's the talents in a nutshell. Pretty easy. I mean, a few things you could swap are the tier 2s between these, and then these two tiers, the CC tier and the survivability tier. So other than that, this is pretty much your go-to setup. Maybe Permafrost, maybe like Abominations, Might, or Blinding Sleet. It really, it's whatever. But other than that, this tier, or yeah, this tier, the last tier, this tier, and the first tier are pretty much always going to be the same, at least for the time being, until either buffs or nerfs come out. So that's talent. I guess next we'll talk about your gear. I'm just gonna repair. Okay, good. Gearing is again pretty simple. Single target, which is most of what raids are. You're gonna want to get crit, haste, and then mastery, I believe, is the stat priority. First, mastery and versatility are kind of equal. Mastery is really good for like AoE, whereas crit and haste are good for single target. So, I mean, you can kind of swap it around. Maybe you want to get more like mastery for a certain fight or something, but I think for the most part you want to go crit, haste, mastery equals verse, something along those lines. I am no means have any of my best in slots or most of my best in slots, so this is just what the best things I have at the moment. We'll go, I guess, talk about your artifact weapon. Sort of the relics that you want to shoot for are blast radius, nothing but the boots, and ambidextry. Dead of Winter is okay, but if you have a relic that's like 20 or 30 item levels higher, maybe even less, maybe 15 or so, it's probably best just to get the raw stats on your weapon rather than the small bonus you're going to get from the rune. Yeah, like for example, I have this I think I replaced this 945. Like, Rune Frost is not a very good one, but it was just like 40 item levels higher than my old one, so just the stats you're going to get on your weapon is probably way better than the small bonus. So yeah, those three: blast, radius, nothing but the boots, ambidextry, and I guess Dead of Winter if you have nothing better. All the other stuff is kind of not very good. That's what you're going to want to do with runes. Tier piece for Frost Death Knight, this tier is insane. Howling Blast and Obliterate just do more damage, which are two of your most damaging spells. And then your 4-piece is just nuts. You do a ton of frost damage. So get your 4-piece, it's insane. Legendaries. I think what you want to get is the Newfound Will, Whiteout Bindings. These are sort of your two go-to, I think. I think Cold Heart could be good. I'm not sure, I don't have it. Obviously the Vision you want to get. I think it's just nuts. Other than that, the trinket or the Legendaries I'm using are the Newfound Will, which is nuts. Obliterate, 10% more damage, and has a chance to regen a rune, which is great. Obliterate's one of your most damaging spells. The Whiteout Bindings makes all of your frost damage do more damage during your Pillar of Frost. So that's like 20 seconds of 50% of 20. That's 20 seconds of 20% increased strength and 15% increased frost damage. That's pretty nuts. And then the Vision obviously is great. Just for now, I have these two shitty ones because I have, or not two. I have these, the Newfound Will and this sort of mediocre one, which is okay. Your trinkets, this tier of rating are Fellhounds. They drop it. Shadow Fang. Shadow Singed Fang. Your melee and ranged abilities has a chance to increase your strength. And your auto attacks have a chance to increase your crit. Which strength you want, crit you want. So this trinket's pretty good. Another good trinket that drops is from this dude, Vara Mothras. The Sweeping Scourge Wing. Versatility, which is, it's a mediocre stat, but your melee attacks have a chance to deal 400k shadow to the target, and if there's no enemies, so if you're on like a single target boss, it deals an additional 200k damage. So AoE, it's good if you're just smacking around some packs. If you're smacking a boss, it does it's like 660,000-ish damage, which is pretty good. Then your other trinket that drops, obviously the Vision. This one seems okay. I mean, I'd probably use it if I had it, but I'm not 100% on it. Other good trinkets that don't drop from the raid. The Anger Boda from Ma is good. If you have a high auto level one, which I don't. The where's upper? Return to Kerrigan. The Eye of Command is pretty good if you have high item level one. And I think those are the main ones that you could get outside of the raid, which are good. I think there's an Assault on Violet Hold one that's also really good, but the chances of actually getting it is super low because you can't do Mythic Keys on Violet Hold. I think it's this one. Your melee attacks increase your strength, stacking up to 20 times. I think that's a pretty decent one as well. So, but the raid ones are the Fang, the one from Vara Mothras, and then obviously the legendary. I'm just using two shitty ones because I haven't been lucky enough to get any good ones. So I guess I'll now talk about what I guess Frosty Kids are about. You're not really a burst class unless you are doing AoE damage with the Frost Scythe and your Cinderghost's Fury. You're more of a single target or sort of sustained AoE damage class. So sustained single target sustained AoE is what you're best at, and a few reasons why. Your cooldowns are not very long, they're very short, and they're not very powerful. But together, and due to their short cooldown, you'll be able to put out a lot of damage. So a couple things allow this to happen. First off, rune forging. Razor Ice, which you want to put on your main and hand weapon, puts the stacking debuff on the enemy, increasing the damage they take from your frost attacks, stacking up to 15%. And this, whatever target you've stacked this up to 5 times and it hasn't fallen off, you get this effect. So if you're fighting like a boss, for example, you want to stack that up to 5 times to do more damage, and you'll get it for the whole fight pretty much. The other thing is your other rune forge that you want to put on your offhand weapon. So your weapon has a chance to heal you for 6% of your health, I think. Chance to heal you for 6%. Either of it's maybe it's of the damage or the health, I'm not too sure. And increase your total strength by 15% for 15 seconds. So pretty much, as long as you're hitting something, you're going to have this buff forever. So whatever strength you have, like I have 41k right now, almost 42k. As long as you're attacking something, you're going to have 50% more strength the whole time. And couple that with your frost debuff that you stack. They take 15% more damage from your frost attacks. Then on top of that, you couple that with your Pillar of Frost, increasing your strength by another 20%. And you can pretty much do this, the cooldown is incredibly short, and because of your Ice Cap talent, you'll be able to cast it a lot more than you usually can. So you're just getting a lot of these little passive increases in your stats, which sort of add up throughout a whole fight. It won't be very impressive like burst damage, but over a course of a fight, it adds up. Other things that you should keep in mind. I think that's all of it when it comes to sort of what you're about. I guess a few things now to talk about are sort of the procs you have. Rhyme is one of them. Obliterating has a 45% chance to cause your next Howling Blast to cost nothing and do 300% additional damage. That's pretty good, so you pretty much never want to use Howling Blast unless you have that Rhyme proc, because otherwise it does pretty lackluster damage. And maybe if you're out of range of something or trying to attack like a flying target, but even then it's going to cost you 1 rune, so you're just wasting runes at that point. So you pretty much only want to cast your Howling Blast when Rhyme is active. The other thing is Killing Machine. Your auto attack crits have a chance to make your next Obliterate automatically crit, which is really good. You're a dual wielding class, so you attack pretty fast. You want to have a pretty high crit, so you're critting a lot. And just making your Killing Machine proc more is good because of things like Nothing But Boots, increases the crit damage by Obliterate, and Ambidextrity increases the offhand damage dealt by your Obliterates. So the more your crit and Obliterate, the better, essentially. I guess next we'll talk about sort of your survivability. You've got pretty much 3 survivability spells: Anti-Magic Shield, Icebound Fortitude, and Death Strike. Anti-Magic Shell is one of the it's a pretty broken spell, honestly. Spells that let you get around game mechanics are pretty good. You know, spells like Karma or Paladin's Bubbles. Like, and this is on a 1-minute cooldown. For example, if you're doing the last boss in Entronus, Argus, and he puts that Death Blight, whatever the fuck, Soul Blight on you in the first phase, and you have to run out of the group to drop it in the back, what you can do as a Death Knight is you get the Soul Blight on you, like I'm hitting the boss. I run out to the back of the room, I pop my anti-magic shield, the Soul Blight will instantly pop off because of the anti-magic shield's effect. Then I could run back to the boss and start damaging again. You know, examples like that. That's what makes anti-magic shield really good. Next, I guess we'll talk about Death Strike. Pretty much the only times you're going to want to use Death Strike is when Icebound Fortitude is active, or when you get a killing blow on something, because it'll refund a rune if you use it, which can be pretty good if you're low on runes. So you'll use it a few times probably, depending on the fight you're in, if there's lots of ads or something, if you get lots of killing blows because of this passive here. When you kill an enemy, your next Death Strike is free, and its healing is increased by 100%. And the other time you only want to use Death Strike is when Icebound Fortitude is active, because of one of these things here. Which one? Here. Death Strike heals for 400% more health while Icebound Fortitude is active. So if you're not getting healed, maybe in like, or if you like tanked something, or you drew aggro, or something, you can quickly pop Icebound Fortitude and Death Strike, and you can pretty much heal yourself to max, like instantly. Other times you're gonna want to use this Icebound Fortitude is during like burst phases of bosses. Obviously, with damage mitigation spells like this, 20% reduced damage, you're gonna want to use them at higher health, so you get more value out of the spell. If you use it when you're at like a 4th life, you're only gonna take 20% reduced damage for that, 1/4 of your health bar. But if you use it at like 80% life, there's a lot more value you're getting out of this one spell. So that's sort of your defensives in a nutshell. I guess we'll go on to your cooldowns, your main damage cooldowns, which are Obliteration, Pillar Frost, and I guess to some extent Cinder Ghost's Fury. Pillar Frost just increases your strength by a flat 20% and grants immunity to movement effects and knockbacks and stuff like that. Not much to say about this. It's a pretty good spell. You pretty much want to use this spell on cooldown throughout a fight, because you're going to be regenerating it really fast with Ice Cap. Your other ability is Obliteration for the next 10 seconds. Frost Strike and Howling Blast grant Killing Machine instead of your auto attack crits. So this allows you about 10 seconds of pretty, I wouldn't say insane, but decent burst damage. So what you're going to want to do is you'll use Obliteration, and hopefully you don't have a Killing Machine already procced, which it's hard because sometimes your auto attack is going to crit and you're going to get an Obliteration proc. But usually you want to use it when you don't have a Killing Machine. You're going to want a Frost Strike or Howling Blast if you have Rhyme, and your next Obliterate is going to crit. Then you're going to want to use Frost Strike or Howling Blast if you have the Rhyme. And you're just going to repeat that back and forth for the 10 seconds of Obliteration. So that's your two major cooldowns. I guess the third one sort of is Cinder Ghost's Fury. Summons a dragon, which does a shitload of damage to a lot of targets. This is really the only spell you have to think about using. Like you have to plan out when you're going to use in a fight. If it's a single target fight like Argus, except for his like intermediate phase with all the ads, but single target fights like Varamothres or whatever, you just use at the start of the fight on cooldown. But if there's going to be multiple ads spawning, maybe on the Coven, maybe, or Kingaroth, or the fuck that giant Ragnaros bitch looking guy, you can sort of plan when there's going to be maybe 2, 3, 4 ads out. You can pop this, hopefully in combination with Pillar of Frost and your what the fuck is it called? Your stacks of Razor Ice, because it's frost damage, as you can see. So if you're doing 15% more damage with Razor Ice, you have Pillar of Frost going, you have your Fallen Crusader going, like this damage can become insane. I think I've crit around maybe 8 mil, 6 mil, somewhere in there. And it's AoE, so if there's more than one target, you can do a shitload of damage very quick. Fights like the High Command, where the Admiral, I think, spawns those 3 ads, so you can have your damage increasing Pillar of Frost and shit going. Those ads spawn, you Cinder Ghost's Fury, and you hit everything for at least like 4 mil or something. 4 mil to 4 targets in one global is pretty good. So that's really the only time you have to think about it. Other than that, I just use it at the start of a fight. Because it does have a 5-minute cooldown. It's your longest cooldown you have, pretty much. So if you use it at the start of a fight, maybe if DPS is low or DPS dies, you'll be able to use it again at the end of the fight or in the middle or something. So yeah, that's your major DPS cooldowns. I guess next we'll go on to your rotation as a Frost Death Knight. It's pretty fucking easy. You really only have 4 spells you use. The first being Remorseless Winter. Sort of an AoE spell. You want to have this on cooldown as much as possible. And due to a lot of things like Frozen Soul, when Remorseless Winter ends, your weapons do burst damage. Things like your Gathering Storm makes Remorseless Winter better. So you pretty much want to have Remorseless Winter on cooldown as much as possible. Next you have your Obliterate, a brutal attack with both weapons dealing physical damage. This is your Rune Spender. So pretty much what you want to do in a fight, at least when you're opening up DPS, is you're going to want to open up with a Remorseless Winter, then instantly Obliterate, getting 2 stacks of Gathering Storm. So we'll Obliterate. See, we got 2 stacks of Gathering Storm. Maybe you hit it again. And then that's pretty much how you start a fight, is you Remorseless Winter, Obliterate, Obliterate, and then you start Frost Striking. And so pretty much after that first couple globals on a boss, what you're going to do afterwards is you're going to use Howling Blast whenever your Rhyme procs. Like right now, that Rhyme is the top thing here. And then you're just going to manage your runes and your runic power, just alternating between, Obliterating and Frost Striking. But it's also important to keep your Remorseless Winter on cooldown. But what you want to try to do to maximize your DPS is you're going to want to try to start pooling your runes, your frost runes, when you start to notice that your Remorseless Winter is coming off cooldown. So, I'm just doing damage, and, right now, Remorseless Winter is almost off cooldown. So, I'm going to want to instantly obliterate if I can, because you're instantly going to get 2 stacks of Gathering Storm. So that's what you're going to kind of want to aim for, is to obliterate right after you activate Remorseless Winter, which is, it's easier said than done. I fuck it up a lot of the times, and I mean, you don't want to waste like a global or 2 just to obliterate when you activate Remorseless Winter. You would rather be using your globals than just waiting to get that little DPS boost. So it just takes practice, but it's something to keep in mind if you want to maximize your DPS. So that's pretty much your rotation, is Remorseless Winter on cooldown, obliterating and frost striking, managing your runes and your runic power, trying not to go over, trying not to have nothing to do, which will happen a lot of the time as a Frost Death Knight. Which is why they give you a nice get out of jail free card, which is your Empowered Rune Weapon. Your Empowered Rune Weapon immediately activates all of your runes, or regenerates all your runes, and it generates you 25 runic power, which is enough to Frost Strike. So if you're DPSing and you come to a point where you don't have any runes and you don't have enough runic power to Frost Strike, that's probably a good point to activate your Empowered Rune Weapon, because it lets you go back to DPS instead of just sitting there waiting for something to regenerate. See if I can get that to happen here. See, like right now I'm not doing anything. I had to wait for runes to regenerate. Here would be a good example. Like I have nothing to do, so I'd activate it, giving me stuff to do immediately. Another thing you can do with Empowered Rune Weapon is you can kind of predict if you're not going to be able to do anything when your Remorseless Winter is coming off cooldown. Sometimes I like to, here Remorseless Winter is coming off cooldown, so I'll do this and I'll activate Rune Weapon so I can instantly obliterate a couple times in a row. Just little things like that, but I have the legendary that lets me get 2 stacks of Rune Weapon. So I have a little bit more freedom with it, but like I said before, this is not a very good legendary. It doesn't really increase your DPS too much. You're going to want to shoot for the Whiteout Bindings or maybe Cold Heart. So that's what your Rune Weapon is for. So we've gone over the basic rotation. Remorseless Winter on cooldown, obliterating and frost striking, managing your runes, trying to obliterate instantly after activating Remorseless Winter to get those 2 stacks of Gathering Storm, and then Howling Blast when you have Rime. So that's sort of your standard non-cooldown rotation, but you're obviously going to be using your DPS cooldowns, and your rotation changes a little bit, like I said before. Instead of managing your runes between these 2 abilities, you're going to want to alternate between Frost Strike and Howling Blast if you have Rime with your Obliterate during obliteration. So I guess I'll go over an example of what your rotation will look like during obliteration. So I would start with this, and then Rime, Obliterate, Rime, Obliterate, See, I didn't even get a fucking I didn't even get to Howling or Frost Strike during that obliteration, which you know, is good because Howling Blast does a shitload of damage. Damage. Was it this one? I think it was this one, right? Yeah. You know, maximum hit was 2.5 mil, which is way more than Frost Strike. So yeah, that's pretty much what you do during the 8 seconds. I believe it's 8 seconds, 10 seconds of obliteration. Just alternating between Howling Blast if you have Rhyme, Frost Strike with your Obliterate to get the full value out of obliteration. I guess next I will sort of do a pseudo pull, like what you're going to want to do in a raid environment. Things to keep in mind is I guess consumables, first of all. If you want to maximize your DPS, you're obviously going to want to have consumables. Flask of Countless Armies. I've been using Haste Food just because if you didn't know, your haste increases your attack speed and rune regeneration, which is quite good. More attack speed is good, more rune regeneration is good because your attacks give you runic power and rune regeneration. Like haste is great for frosty kids. So I use Haste Food, Countless Armies as my 2 consumables. My DPS potion that I use is Prolonged Power. Like I said before, you're not really a burst class, so you don't really need things like Old War. Having that stat increase for a whole minute is pretty powerful as this class, so Prolonged Power is what you're going to want to go with. Other than that, enchants on your gear. If you're going to want to try and maximize your DPS, having enchants is very important. You're going to want to go Mark the Claw for your neck. I don't have enchants on my back because I'm a broke ass bitch, but you're going to want to get strength. Enchant on your back. And on your rings, I would go with haste enchants, which I only have one. I don't have an enchant on this one. For your sockets, if you are lucky enough to get sockets, I would probably just go haste as well. That's what I've been doing, and it seems to be working out pretty well for me. Like you can see, I have socket with haste, socket with haste. I could probably go buy a better socket because it's only 150. Socket with haste. And like I said before, you're going to want to make sure you have Razor Eyes Hunter, main hand, Crusader on your offhand. So these are all little things you can do to maximize your DPS and try and get ahead of people. Another thing you can do is pre-potting, which is pretty important if you're, trying to do more DPS. Because normally, if you don't pre-pot, you're only going to get a DPS potion once a fight. But if you pre-pot, you're going to get 2 of them a fight, which, 2 is always better than 1, right? So what you're going to want to do, if you're in a competent group, they're going to do a DBM pull timer usually. And you're going to want to pre-pot before the tanks pull the boss and before you get in combat. Because once you're in combat and you use a DPS potion, you'll not be able to use it again until you're out of combat. So if a group does a DBM pull, you're going to want to try and pre-pot on I usually do it around 2 to 1 second because a lot of the times the fuckers like to jump the gun and fuck up pre-pots for the whole group. So I usually give maybe an extra second or so to try and get my pre-pot out, around 2 seconds I'd say. Because you're always going to have that like trigger happy hunter that is an asshole and ruins the pre-pot for everybody. But yeah, pre-potting is important. And I'll go through an example here in a second. So let's do a mock. Let's pretend this target dummy right here is a boss. Like this is Argus. It's heroic Argus right here, and we're going to want to try and just try hard this fucking target dummy. So what's going to happen is you're going to do a DBM pull. And around 2 or 1 second or so, that's when you're going to want to pre-pot.
4,
use your potion.
3, 2,
I'll use my potion.
1.
Start with the merciless winter. Obliterate. And just start going into my damage. I want to make sure I have 5 stacks of Razor Ice before I activate my DPS. So I activated both my damage. Then you're going to want to do your Obliterate rotation. And it's just back into your normal rotation. Just managing those runes and your runic power. Here I'm going to Remorseless Winter, Obliterate. I have nothing to do, so I'm going to activate Rune Weapon. I'm going to use Pillar of Frost again, because it's off cooldown. This is a moment where it's kind of awkward, I have nothing to do. I could have maybe used Rune Weapon there again, because I have the Legendary. And Remorseless Winter, Obliterate instantly. And now, see, both my cooldowns are coming off right now. I'm going to go ahead and Runic Weapon, Remorseless Winter. I'm going to activate both my cooldowns and go back into Obliteration Rotation. Obliteration Rotation. And you see I'm hovering right around 1.2, 1.1 mil DPS. And keep in mind this is without Flask. Without, Bloodlust. Shit like that. See now, Remorseless Winter is coming off cooldown, so I try to pool my runes. And Pillar of Frost came off cooldown, so I instantly used it, getting that DPS increase. A good time to use your second pot is when you Bloodlust as a group, whatever the fuck that is. So let's say next time my cooldowns are off, the group decides to Bloodlust. In about 16 or so seconds. What you can do is you can activate Pillar of Frost before Obliteration, because Pillar of Frost lasts for 20 seconds. Obliteration is only 8 to get the most you can out of it. So now I'm just back into the Obliteration. I should probably pre-potted there, because this is when we're going to lust, or pot it again, because this is when our group decided to lust, but I obviously forgot, because this is a fake ass pull. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell, is you just do that the whole fucking fight. Pretty easy. The only thing I could have done different there is Cinder Ghost's Fury there at the start. Because it's a single target fight, fucking target dummy. I could have just Cinder Ghost's Fury when I had my Pillar of Frost and Razor Ice. That's another thing you're going to want to keep in mind. I guess we'll just go over the DPS breakdown really quick. Howling Blast, Obliterate. Keep in mind Obliterate also is offhand with damage too. So Obliterate is a total of 23% of your damage. Howling Blast is about 16. Frost Strike is about, again, about 23%. So you can see where a lot of your damage comes from. All the blue stuff is frost damage, and the yellowish stuff is physical damage. So you get a lot of frost damage. So things like Razor Ice are really good. So you want to make sure you have Razor Ice all the time. The thing about Razor Ice, I guess I'll show you here. This target dummy doesn't have Razor Ice. It's got 1 stack, 2 stacks, 3 stacks, 4 stacks, 5 stacks. See, that took a little while to get all 5 stacks. So one thing you can do before you use your DPS cooldowns is you can wait for your 5 stacks. Because as you can see from that last, whatever the fuck one, this one, no, not that one, this one, right? No. You can see that a lot of your damage is frost. So having that full 15% increased damage is great. Like, let's time it, I guess. Here's a timer. So let's, how am I going to do this? Start it. Four, 5. So it took like 10, 11 seconds to get 5 stacks of Razor Ice. And if you know what you're going to want to do is when you pull a boss, you want to activate both your cooldowns. But if you activate them instantly before you have the full 10 stacks or 5 stacks of Razor Ice, like that took about 10 seconds, you're going to miss out on your Razor Ice while, or I should say your full benefit of Razor Ice while, like pretty much the whole duration of your Obliteration and half your duration of Pillar of Frost, which is pretty, it probably doesn't sound like a lot, but every little bit adds up, especially in this game. So it's something I don't do all the time, and something I could be doing better about is waiting for all 5 stacks of Razor Ice before activating my Obliteration and my Pillar of Frost for the first time on a fight. I don't like the way that dummy's looking at me. It's gonna one-shot me. So that's another thing you can do to sort of get ahead, is wait for 5 stacks before cooldowns. Anything else to know? I don't think there's much else to know. I guess another thing to keep in mind is being a Blood Elf, because first of all, just 1% crit as a Blood Elf. It's okay. Nothing too spectacular. The other thing is an Arcane Torrent. As a Frost Death Knight, if you have nothing to do, which happens more than you'd like, Arcane Torrent can be a sort of a lifesaver. It has a 1.5 minute cooldown, and it restores, well, it interrupts for 2 seconds, which is important. That can matter in certain fights, phases, whatever. But the channel on top is you get 20 runic power, which is enough, almost enough to frost strike. So if you're, sitting around like 5, 3, like runic power, you get Arcane Torrent, and usually by that time, you'll generate a couple more. Like say you're at 2 runic power, you activate Arcane Torrent, you're now at 22, and probably by that time, you're going to use your next global. You'll have 25 again, and you can Frost Strike. So this can be sort of a lifesaver in a lot of situations. Because of this ability here, when you spend runic power, which Frost Strike, you spend runic power, costs 25. You have a % chance to gain a rune per rune power spent. So you're spending 25 here, you got like a 1.8% chance times 25 chance of regenerating a rune. That's pretty good. So Arcane Torrent, I think, is really good, at least for Death Knight. Other classes or races, I think, what is it, Orc? They have increased crit damage or some shit. That's probably a pretty good one too. Maybe classes that give haste, like Troll. But I'd go with Blood Elf because you get the 1% crit, 1% crit, and you get Arcane Torrent, which are pretty good. Your other racial passives don't really matter, like that doesn't really matter. But these two are pretty good for Death Knight, so that's why I'm Blood Elf. I guess really quick I'll talk about macros. I don't really use any macros because I'm fucking elite, but two I do use are these two, B-Res. B-Res is pretty important as a Death Knight. Like if you're in a mythic dungeon, chances are you're probably the only person with a battle res. And in raids, if someone calls for battle res, you can quickly help with a mouse over macro. Pretty much what this lets you do is if you have your raid frames, like say like a healer dies, and you want to battle res them, you don't have to click on the person, you just mouse over their unit frame in the raid frame, and you press your button instead of clicking and then pressing. It's just a quick way so you don't untarget your thing you're attacking. The other thing is this macro. Because Pillar Frost and Obliteration, they don't have a global cooldown, and you're pretty much always going to want to use them at around the same time. It's pretty good because you just press one button, activates both of them. I have them on 2 separate keybinds. I don't know why, I just do, just in case shit happens, which, shit does happen. But you're pretty much going to want to use these 2 spells at the same time as much as you can to get the full benefit. But like I said before, this has a 20-second duration, this only has a 10-second duration, so it's okay to activate this before activating Obliteration. As long as you get the full Obliteration during the Pillar of Frost. And things to help you with that are tell me when. I'm in fucking combat for some reason. Tell me when's really good. I would recommend using it. I use it, as you can see here, to tell me when the fuck Remorseless Winter is off cooldown, so I know to activate it again. Why am I in combat? But I have Tell Me When set up to tell me my major DPS cooldowns. As you can see here, Pillar of Frost, Obliterate, Runic Weapon. I could probably add Cindergross's Fury to that. It's just easier for me to track them if they're big and fucking in my face, because my actual keybinds are pretty small. I also use Tell Me When to, like I said before, let me know when Remorseless Winter should be used. I also have it to tell me when Unholy Strength is going, which should be pretty much 100% of the time, which is this one here. It also tells me that, you know, the duration of these two spells, how long I have that buff. See, if I activate both of them, it tells me, you know, how long I have both these buffs for. So I know, you know, I know when to use my Obliteration rotation and when not to use it, like here, for example. So that's pretty much what I use Tell Me When for. It's a very nice tool. I recommend using it. It helps a lot. See, this tells me when my Unholy Strength is going. I think that's it. Frost Death is easy. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. I didn't go over all your spells. I mean, you got things like your Interrupt, which is great. Have your Interrupt bound all the time. Command Undead or Control Undead, not very relevant, except for in instances like Black or Cold or some shit. Hellstones are great. If you don't have a Hellstone, oops, put a fucking health pot there. Having, you know, the option to heal yourself is great. Death Grip is pretty busto bananas. This can be used as an additional interrupt. It can be used to, you know, displace certain mobs, like on Agrimar, you know, those little fucking skittery dudes. If one's getting too close to the boss, you can fucking pull them away. So Death Grip is great. Additional interrupt, displacement. Wraithwalk is shitty. Being Death Knight, you have no movement speed increase except for this, 45 seconds. It does make you immune to root effects, and you can't really be slowed by it. And thankfully, they've added the functionality to jump while you're wraith walking, because a lot of the times in earlier Legion, you'd be wraith walking and you get stuck on a lip, like, I don't know, like a lip like the stair here, and you couldn't fucking move. It was really annoying. But wraith walk is what you got. Feels bad, man. Chains of Ice, you know, not incredibly relevant in PvE. Maybe on fights like the Coven, when those big scary dudes spawn, you can Chain of Ice a couple of them to slow them down if your raid already hasn't CC'd them. And it's also relevant if you have this legendary, which I've never used, so I don't know how good it is. You gain a stack of Cold Heart, increasing your next Chains of Ice to do some damage. If Chains of Ice is used, you have a 20 target will be stunned. So that's the only other time you'd really use Chains of Ice, which, like I said, I don't even have this spell, so, or that legendary, so I just throw it here. That's all your spells, man. You don't have very many spells in this class. I mean, you got Taunt. I don't even have it bound. I could probably bind it, you know, just in case, like tanks die and shit. Like, you could Taunt, you know, activate Heistbound Fortitude and start Death Striking to tank for like 8 seconds. That's like really the only time where this spell is relevant. Yeah, that's it. Pretty easy. Pretty face roll. Use 4 buttons to deeps. You use your DPS cooldowns pretty much on cooldown. And yeah, you smash face. you're good single target, sustained damage. You don't expect crazy burst from this class. A lot of the times you'll slowly just be climbing the DPS meters, and you'll start at the bottom, but throughout the course of a fight, once like the burst classes, like demon hunters and monks and all those shitty fucking classes, those scumbags, um, below their load, you're gonna start creeping up on them, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you get good procs, or if you're out gearing them, like you'll pass them. Frosted Knight, it's a fun class. It's easy. I think it's easy. And definitely with the changes they've made since when I played DPS last during Nighthold, when the old play style, was pretty much you breath of Cinder Ghost and just try and keep this fucking shit up as long as possible. It's definitely simpler. You're kind of back to the original classic, Emerald Nightmare style of DPSing as Frost, where you're just single targeting. You're not worrying about keeping your breath of Cinder Ghost, so you're not dying to dumb mechanics, just trying to keep your breath going, which I'm sure many Nighthold Death Knights can attest to. Yeah, easy stuff. Pretty simple. Yeah, that's about it. Good luck. Have fun.